we were sold down the river by Trump voters for their personal gain or personal advantage that they perceived they would get. Let me dig into the term being sold down the river. It comes from slavery, okay? And it's got a strange connection to 2 or 3 different events. One event was a Trail of Tears, where Native Americans were removed from their lands in the Deep South and pushed west of the Mississippi River, settled on reservations. There was a reason for that. The reason for that was the invention of the cotton gin by Eli Whitney that turned cotton from a loser crop because it was too hard to process and separate the cotton from the cotton bolls and everything else to get a decent amount of pure cotton that could be processed. The cotton gin solved that problem because it did it mechanically. Hence, the need to grow cotton exploded. And to do that, they needed land. And who had the land? The Native Americans. So the Indian Removal Act forced the Native Americans out of their lands in the Deep South so they could be repurposed for growing cotton. In order to harvest the cotton, you needed manpower. Well, the manpower in those days were slaves. So there weren't a lot of slaves in the Deep South, but there were a lot of slaves in the upper states of the South, you say like Missouri or somewhere like that. So they had to relocate those slaves to get the manpower where it's going to be needed to harvest the cotton. So guess what happened? The slaves were sold down the river, literally, the Mississippi River, and transported from the upper states that were slave states to the Deep South states where the cotton growing land existed. And that was so that slave owners and farmers in the South could gain an advantage. So literally, what happened with Trump was the MAGA voters voted him in to disadvantage the rest of us because they thought only the people they viewed as being in their way would be affected. But something happened. The river went out of control when Trump got in office, and the folks that sold us down the river got swept up in the flood, and they also are floating down the river with us, an unexpected consequence of their action. So, unlike what happened during slavery, when slaves were literally sold down the river so that the slave owners in the South could get an advantage, and the Native Americans were forced off their lands so that the slave owners in the South and the farmers could get an advantage. The MAGA folks miscalculated, and they're being swept down the river with the rest of us that they sold down the river. And they don't know how to stop it because they're struggling to keep their heads above water with everyone else. But guess what? It's too late now. As they are famously known to say, elections have consequences. And they are experiencing those consequences along with those that they thought would bear the brunt of the damage.